Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Get ready, because what just transpired at the White House press briefing was not merely a mess, it was a complete political catastrophe broadcasted to the world. Karoline Leavitt, Trump's chosen MAGA press secretary, faced a grilling live on Fox News. That's right, Fox News. The whole debacle was about the Epstein files, and let me tell you, it was a total calamity. Picture a press secretary floundering in her own narrative, evading questions, contradicting herself, and hurling every possible excuse at reporters in a frantic bid to cover up Trump's Epstein mess. And guess what? It was utterly unsuccessful. This moment marked the MAGA media machine slamming into a brick wall. I'm here to dissect why this is significant.
Thank you, Caroline. There's been a lot of discussion about the Epstein files and the president's comments yesterday calling it a hoax. Can you clarify which part of the Epstein hoax is the hoax part?
The president is referring to the fact that Democrats have now seized on this as if they ever wanted transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, which is an asinine suggestion for any Democrat to make. The Democrats had control of this building, the White House, for 4 years, and they didn't do a dang thing when it came to transparency in regards to Jeffrey Epstein and his heinous crimes. It was this president who directed the Department of Justice and the Attorney General to do an exhaustive review.
All right, let's dive into the latest White House spectacle that's nothing short of humiliating. After weeks of evading the press over the Epstein files debacle, Karoline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary, finally emerged from obscurity. And guess which outlet confronted her? Fox News of all networks. One Trump usually relies on for easy questions. Not this time, though. Fox challenged Levit on Trump's assertion that the Epstein case is a hoax. Her answer was an exercise in political contortion. She pointed fingers at the Democrats for not releasing the files while in power, yet also accused them of orchestrating the current uproar. So let me get this straight. Democrats did nothing, but they're still culpable? That contradiction is so glaring it leaves you reeling. This goes beyond spin. It's a complete spin disaster, and the public is fully aware. When you campaign on uncovering Epstein's ties, but then retract, prepare to be scrutinized, even by your own allies.
Through on his promises to the American people, but he doesn't like to see Democrats and the mainstream media covering this like it's the biggest story that the American people care about. The president has been working so hard this week. On Tuesday, he went to Pennsylvania, where he secured $90 billion in investments for the Commonwealth, for the people of that state. After that, he came back to the Oval Office at 8 p.m. He went in there to whip votes to get the Genius Act signed into law, and because of his efforts, that bill is now going to be signed.
This is where it gets really fascinating. The Trump team's grip on the story unraveled right on live television. For years, the MAGA strategy has been straightforward, distract, deflect, pin it on the Democrats, and repeat. But now, that approach isn't succeeding. Even Fox News, typically a safe haven for Trump, is refusing to cooperate. They're probing into the Epstein documents, and Karoline Leavitt can't twist the narrative to her advantage. The Trump administration has resorted to their usual tactics, talking up trade deals, boasting about unrelated successes, and inserting some whataboutism. However, the media is staying focused on the Epstein scandal. They sense vulnerability. And here's the clincher. When you've lost Fox News, you've lost control of your core media domain. That's why there's evident panic emerging from the White House. They can't redirect the news cycle back to their narrative comfort zone. The Epstein cover-up story is taking center stage, and MAGA's protective media shield is crumbling.
Right, but you do have some prominent figures, including the Senate Majority Leader, the House Speaker, voicing support for the files to come out. Representative Massey collecting signatures that would force a discharge petition for a vote on the floor for this. It doesn't seem to be going away. What is stopping the administration from just redacting any sensitive information, grand jury information, and putting out what is appropriate so that the American people can decide and then let this story die?
Well, in terms of redactions or grand jury seals, those are questions for the Department of Justice. Those are also questions for the judges who have that information under a seal, and that would have to be requested, and a judge would have to approve it. That's out of the president's control. He has said, in agreement with some of the leaders on Capitol Hill, that if the Attorney General and the Department of Justice come across any other credible evidence, they should provide that to the American people. The president has said that, and he agrees with them on that.
Why did he fire Maureen Comey?
The Department of Justice did.
Let's dive into the world of unfulfilled commitments, because this one is monumental. Trump and his entourage campaigned vigorously with vows to uncover everything about Jeffrey Epstein. They ignited the MAGA crowd with assurances of a comprehensive unveiling of the Epstein files, promising to unmask everyone entwined in the vile network of trafficking and abuse. Jump to the present moment, it's a complete retreat. When questioned, Karoline Leavitt and the Trump administration abruptly pivot to blaming legal hurdles, citing that judges must consent first. They argue that grand jury regulations restrict them, leaving them powerless. Seriously, since when does Trump honor the judicial system? This is the same individual who complains about activist judges whenever a decision opposes him. Yet suddenly, the judiciary serves as his rationale for withholding the Epstein documents. This isn't transparency, it's a slow-motion cover-up. The MAGA loyalists aren't naive. They're beginning to notice the bait and switch. Trump pledged to unveil the truth, but now it seems he's shielding the elite, possibly because his own name could be implicated.
Directly in touch with some of the MAGA influencers that are still not satisfied with the administration's handling, and has a message to them and similar to what the president has said, which is sort of either let this go or we don't need your support.
Well, look, the president and this team are always in contact with the president's supporters with voices of many kinds on both sides of the aisle. I think that's part of the reason this president is a great president, because he's willing to listen and hear other people's perspectives. But ultimately, he has led this country, not just over the past 6 months to historic success, but also through his first 4 years as president. And as the leader and the creator of the MAGA movement, he has led through these perilous times for our country based on instinct and in the best interest of the country. And as I always say, the American people...
This is where the betrayal really hits hard. Trump outright refused the calls for a special prosecutor to look into the Epstein case. Let that sink in for a moment. This is the guy who previously labeled the Epstein scandal as a fraud. Yet when given the chance to demonstrate that it's not about shielding the powerful, he turned his back. There's no special counsel, no extra investigation, zilch. And let me tell you, MAGA followers, they're absolutely livid. These are the very folks who had Trump's back, who rallied for transparency on Epstein and demanded those responsible be held accountable. Now, they're witnessing Trump doing exactly what he accused the Democrats of, protecting the elites by burying the truth. This isn't just a political U-turn, it's a real slap in the face to his supporters. Influential voices within the MAGA circle are raising alarms, asking the glaring question, if there's nothing to hide, why doesn't Trump unveil the files and appoint a special prosecutor? The silence is deafening, and the disappointment is rapidly spreading.
The Canadian Prime Minister said the president had agreed to a July 21st deadline to sort of work towards a trade agreement. That's 4 days from now. Could there be a trade agreement with Canada in 4 days?
Well, look, we'll see. The trade team continues to be very active in our conversations and discussions with Canada. The president himself has said, unfortunately, our neighbors to the north have been pretty difficult to deal with when it comes to matters on trade. But in trade, generally speaking, as you know, 25 countries have received letters thus far from the president directly with his big, beautiful signature on them, from Japan to Korea, South Africa, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, just a few countries, and Canada also received a letter for 35%. With that said, if countries want to have legitimate further discussions, the Trump administration and the president's trade team are willing to have further talks, but these letters these countries have been receiving are the deals.
Let's dive into the age-old tactic of diverting attention, because Karoline Leavitt's attempt was an absolute flop. When the scrutiny over the Epstein documents became too intense, what was her move? She veered off to discussions about trade agreements and the economy. Suddenly, it was all about Canada, Japan, and South Africa. There were mentions of letters from Trump and deals he allegedly secured, but here's the catch, no one's buying into it. Even reporters over at Fox News saw right through this attempted diversion. The Epstein affair remains the focal point, and no amount of misdirection will change that. And let's face reality, those trade promises aren't coming through either. Trump once promised 90 bilateral agreements in 90 days. Yet here we are, still stuck on discussions about letters and tariffs instead of actual deals. In truth, this was a desperate gambit to shift the spotlight away from Epstein, and it completely backfired. The public isn't fooled. They're wondering, what's being covered up?
No, I called on Charlie, but Deanna, you can go ahead too. Go ahead.
The president said that he floated the idea of a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. Can you confirm that? And has he asked the Attorney General to do this, to appoint a special prosecutor to look it over?
Well, the idea was floated from someone in the media to the president. The president would not recommend a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. That's how he feels. And as for his discussions with the Attorney General,
this is where the cover-up took center stage and alarms started ringing loudly. The abrupt dismissal of Maureen Comey, the prosecutor who was pursuing Epstein, is sparking serious doubts. During the press briefing, reporters were relentless in questioning Karoline Leavitt about this issue. But instead of providing a straightforward denial, she sidestepped the inquiry. She deflected by saying that the decision was up to the DOJ and refused to clarify if Trump knew about or influenced the decision. That isn't a denial, it's an evasion. And when someone sidesteps a question in this manner, it inevitably leads to people asking, what are you hiding? Just consider it. Trump could have simply stated, I had no involvement in this. But he didn't. His press secretary left things open for speculation. Dismissing the prosecutor who crafted the Epstein case while simultaneously blocking the release of documents isn't just poor optics, it reeks of obstruction. The American public is certainly noticing. All right, let's be honest about the intense devotion being peddled in that briefing room. Karoline Leavitt had the audacity to stand there and tell journalists to essentially have unwavering faith in President Trump. No evidence, no documentation, no explanations, just unquestioning allegiance. That's not being a leader, that's cult behavior. Consider this: the Epstein files remain hidden, the prosecutor was dismissed, there's no special investigator, yet Trump's crew still expects the public to take his word as gospel. Imagine if a Democrat said, disregard the facts, just have faith in the president. The MAGA supporters would go ballistic, and they'd be justified. But when it's Trump, it suddenly becomes acceptable. That's hypocrisy at its finest. The American public is entitled to answers, not pledges of devotion. When your stay-in-office strategy is simply to trust the leader because he claims to know better, you're not managing a government, you're managing a cult. And that's precisely why more people are speaking up. Thanks for sticking around and backing this channel. We're focused on unpacking the narratives the mainstream outlets try to twist, and we're not hesitant to highlight the double standards from any side. If you're fed up with cover-ups, political antics, and relentless manipulation, this is your place. So please do me a solid, like this video, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll always be updated. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the Epstein files will eventually be disclosed, or is this just another cover-up unfolding? Let's dive into it below. Catch you next time.